It started subtly, so subtly, in fact, that I dismissed it entirely the first time. My monthly electric bill had always been fairly consistent. I lived alone, worked from home, didn't host parties, didn't run a bunch of electronics all day, and certainly didn't have energy-hungry kids or pets. So when the utility statement came in nearly double the usual cost, I did what any rational person might do. I blamed myself. Maybe I left the lights on too long. Maybe the air conditioner had been working overtime during the hotter-than-usual nights, or maybe my old fridge was finally deciding to die slowly and take my budget with it. I made excuses, logical ones even, but when the second month arrived, with another massive bill and no discernible change in my daily habits, I started to feel like something was genuinely wrong. The idea of faulty wiring or an old appliance crossed my mind, and I even entertained the possibility of a meter reading mistake. But before I could make a service request, something else caught my attention. Something far more bizarre and unsettling than a broken HVAC system. It was a humming, almost too quiet to be noticed, but persistent and rhythmic, like the low drone of an electric motor. The first time I heard it, it was after midnight, maybe around 2 a.m. I had gotten up for a glass of water, and as I walked past the window that faced the side yard, the noise reached my ears. Curious and now more alert than I'd been all week, I moved aside the curtain and peered through the blinds into the darkness. That's when I saw it. Faint under the moonlight but unmistakably there. A long, black extension cord weaving its way from the outlet on the side of my house, coiled halfway under some decorative mulch, disappearing across the lawn toward my neighbor's fence. My neighbor, Karen. Of course. Just the thought of her made my blood pressure tick upward. She was the self-appointed, never elected, yet somehow eternal president of our tiny HOA, a woman with a permanent scowl, sharp voice, and a disdain for anyone who didn't treat her like the royalty she believed herself to be. Karen had been a thorn in the side of every homeowner on our cul-de-sac, enforcing rules that didn't exist, inventing violations that suited her whims, and hosting monthly HOA meetings that felt more like medieval trials. And recently, she had gotten herself a brand new electric SUV, one of those sleek, overly polished ones that looked like a spaceship, and she parked it out front like a trophy. The charging station for those things was expensive, but Karen never seemed to care about cost. Or maybe she just pretended not to care because she had already found a way to make someone else foot the bill. Me. The next morning, before the sun had risen high enough to burn off the mist clinging to the yards, I followed the extension cord. Sure enough, it was plugged snugly into the outlet box on the exterior wall of my garage. A chill ran down my spine. My property. My outlet. My electricity. And someone, Karen, had decided it was hers to use, no questions asked. I yanked the cord out, and my fingers tingled from the morning dew. I held it in my hands, stared at the fence, and saw the other end trailing through a loose panel into her side yard. That was the proof I needed. I stormed around the block, still holding the cord, my bare feet smacking against the sidewalk, heart pounding like a war drum. I rang her doorbell once, twice, and again. When the door finally creaked open, there she stood, Karen, clad in a silky bathrobe with gaudy pink flamingos, oversized sunglasses covering her eyes even though the sun hadn't fully climbed into the sky yet, and a smug grin twisting her lips as she cradled a protein shake like it was a royal scepter. Karen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, were you charging your car with my electricity? She tilted her head as if my question offended the very fabric of her being. What are you talking about? She said with mock confusion. I held up the extension cord like an accusation. This was plugged into my outlet. I followed it. It leads straight into your yard. Your SUV is the only electric vehicle on this street. You can't seriously pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. Karen let out a dismissive scoff, the kind that sounds more like someone trying to blow away a mosquito than responding to a legitimate concern. Oh, relax, she said. It's just a few volts. You weren't even using that outlet. It's not like it costs you anything. I blinked at her, stunned by the audacity. My bill doubled, I said through gritted teeth. It does cost me something. I don't care if it's a penny or $100. It's my outlet, on my property. You don't get to plug into it like this is some public utility. Her smirk widened. Then maybe you should cut back on your little video games or whatever you people do all day. I mean, really, it's not like you have a family to support. I was so shocked by her casual dismissal, by the insinuation that my singlehood somehow justified her theft, that I didn't say anything for a full 3 seconds. Then I turned, cord still in hand, and walked away. Behind me, I heard the soft click of her door shutting. That day, I bought a lockbox for my outlet. It was a small investment, easy to install, and designed specifically to prevent unauthorized access. I snapped it shut that evening, made sure it was secure, and breathed a sigh of relief. Problem solved, I thought. But I was wrong. 3 days later, I heard the hum again. That same low, eerie buzz that whispered through the air like a mosquito in the dark. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and crept to the window. The outlet was locked. I knew it. I had checked it just hours earlier. But the humming was louder now, and when I looked more closely, I saw that the extension cord was back. But not plugged into the same outlet. This time, it was strung along the opposite side of the house, hidden partially by shrubs, leading toward the crawlspace access vent. My heart dropped. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, tiptoeing across the lawn. Sure enough, the cord snaked through a small hole in the vent slats that led under the house. I pulled it out and followed it back, through more hedges under the fence, and, like clockwork, to Karen's SUV parked in her driveway, humming away in the cool night air like nothing was wrong. Couldn't believe it. She had bypassed the locked outlet and broken into my crawlspace to get to a backup outlet used by the irrigation system and garden lights. This wasn't just passive theft. This was trespassing and vandalism. The next morning, I knocked on her door again. She answered, this time wearing oversized hoop earrings and a towel on her head, like she just finished a spa day. Back so soon? She said, sounding bored. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. You broke into my crawlspace to steal electricity. She raised an eyebrow. Do you have any proof? The cord leads directly to your driveway. She shrugged. That bush is on my side of the line. Maybe it's a city cord or something. Don't be paranoid. I clenched my fists. You're insane. She tilted her head and smiled. You're welcome. With that, she shut the door again. I stood there for a moment, blinking. She had completely crossed every line imaginable and still acted as though she had done me a favor. That's when I realized I needed to stop reacting and start documenting. That evening, I ordered 2 trail cams, small, weatherproof, infrared-enabled devices used by hunters to track wildlife. They'd be perfect for catching a suburban parasite in action. I mounted one near the crawlspace vent and another by the locked outlet. Then I waited. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, I had clear footage of Karen sneaking into my yard after dark, dragging her cord like a thief in the night, plugging it in, and crouching behind the fence to stay hidden. She thought she was being clever. She had no idea she was starring in her own crime documentary. Armed with the footage, I called the local police department. An officer came by, reviewed the evidence, and issued her a citation for theft and trespassing. It wasn't much, just a $250 fine, but it was something. A line in the sand. I thought that might stop her. Didn't. Instead, Karen filed a complaint with the HOA, claiming that my surveillance cameras were a violation of neighborhood guidelines. He's spying on me, she wrote in her grievance, invading my privacy, and creating a hostile environment. I went to the next HOA meeting ready to defend myself, but the board, populated mostly by Karen's longtime friends and yes-men, sided with her. We understand your frustration, one of them said, but cameras aimed at other properties without consent do constitute a breach. I was fined $100 and ordered to remove them. My jaw nearly hit the floor. I pulled out my phone, showed them the footage, and said, "She broke into my house." Karen smiled sweetly and said, "All I see is a neighbor with a grudge." I left the meeting feeling betrayed and defeated, my sense of justice battered by bureaucracy and neighborhood politics. That night, as I sat in the living room staring blankly at the wall, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about electricity anymore. It was about principle, about privacy, about respect. and Karen had trampled all of it like it was hers to walk on. I would not be a victim. Not anymore. After the ludicrous HOA ruling and the pathetic slap on the wrist fine Karen received for illegally siphoning power from my house, I knew I was dealing with a far deeper problem than a nosy neighbor. I was dealing with a manipulative tyrant with friends in low, stupid places, and she had no intention of stopping. She saw my silence as surrender, my camera footage as entertainment, and my indignation as weakness to exploit. That's when I decided I wouldn't play defense anymore. No more reactive measures, no more asking for help from people who weren't willing to lift a finger. No, it was time to go full proactive. This wasn't just about electricity now. Karen had declared war, and while she was out here swinging garden hoses like swords and sending passive-aggressive HOA emails that dripped with condescension and faux concern, I was going to draw up battle plans. I started with my crawl space. No more simple trail cams or lockboxes. I called in a contractor to reinforce the vents with tamper-proof metal grates bolted from the inside, then added motion-sensitive LED spotlights under the eaves of the roof that lit up like the sun if even a squirrel blinked in their direction. I installed decoy cameras, obvious, blinking red dots meant to be found, then placed microcameras in obscure spots she'd never suspect, like inside a fake rock near the bush or in a birdhouse mounted near the crawl space. If she so much as breathed near my siding, I'd catch her. But that was only one part of the plan. I had to deal with her more insidious weapon, the HOA. I read every single page of our bylaws, cross-referenced them with local municipal codes, and discovered several violations that Karen herself was currently committing. For one, her illegally installed solar panels didn't have the required city permit. 2. She was exceeding noise ordinances by running her massive outdoor speakers past 10 p.m. every Friday. And 3, and most deliciously ironic of all, her electric SUV was parked partially on the sidewalk. A clear violation of HOA parking guidelines she had previously weaponized against others. With this ammo, I filed anonymous complaints to the city, the HOA board, and even the county tax assessor's office regarding the suspicious outbuilding in her backyard that she claimed was a she-shed, but I knew full well was being used as an unpermitted guest house. Then I did something beautiful. I attended the next HOA meeting not as myself, but as a concerned neighbor using a proxy name, and I read a statement calling for a vote to temporarily suspend Karen's presidency until an ethics investigation into her behavior could be completed. Chaos erupted in that tiny clubhouse, and Karen's carefully assembled minions, most of whom were just nosy retirees who enjoyed the feeling of power but hated drama, suddenly found themselves unwilling to back her publicly. It didn't pass, but the mere attempt fractured the illusion of her authority. The seed was planted. But Karen wasn't one to slink away quietly. Oh no, she doubled down. The very next week, I received a series of HOA violation notices in the mail, each more absurd than the last. One accused me of leaving unsightly equipment visible in my yard. She meant the trail cam disguised as a rock. Another said my trash can wasn't retrieved from the curb within the 2-hour retrieval window. And a third, my personal favorite, alleged that my grass was a shade too brown and reflected poorly on the community aesthetic. This wasn't enforcement. This was Karen throwing everything she could at me, hoping something would stick. I kept every notice, photographed my yard, documented every response, and started building a dossier of her harassment. In parallel, I posted anonymously in our neighborhood app, describing a fictional neighbor whose outlets kept getting used without permission and asking how people would handle it. The responses were gold. Over 100 people chimed in with outrage, sympathy, and suggestions. But more importantly, several messaged me privately saying they had similar experiences with Karen, mysterious energy spikes, cords where they didn't belong. Even one woman who caught Karen trying to use her garden hose while she was at work. The picture was getting clearer. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. Karen had a history of entitlement, and now she was exposed. That's when the break finally came. One of my cameras, hidden beneath the gutter, caught something incredible. Karen, dressed in her ridiculous camo print tracksuit like she was going on some covert mission, was crouching beside my house with what looked like a multi-tool. She wasn't just plugging in a cord this time. No, she was attempting to rewire the irrigation outlet directly, as if she were some rogue electrician trying to tap into a private grid. Her SUV was parked 3 houses down, clearly to avoid suspicion, and the cord was longer than ever, draped through yards, under a fence, and partially concealed by landscaping. This was no longer just theft. This was premeditated tampering. I immediately called the police, handed over the footage, and this time they took it seriously. An officer returned later that evening with a written citation and a clear warning. "If you so much as enter his property again," he told her with arms folded, "you'll be facing criminal trespass charges, not just fines." I watched from my porch as Karen tried to argue, but the officer wasn't having it. Her hands were trembling, and her smile was gone. But I wasn't done. That same day, I submitted a formal petition to the HOA requesting an emergency board meeting to address leadership ethics, backed by testimony from 3 other neighbors who had stories of their own. The vote went through. Karen, in a spectacular implosion, was removed from her post as HOA president by a narrow margin. Her smug reign was over. But perhaps the most satisfying part came 2 weeks later, when the city conducted a surprise inspection on her home following my earlier complaints. They found multiple code violations, including improper electrical work, unpermitted structures, and icing on the cake, a hazardous makeshift extension cord system that they traced back to my house. She was slapped with a list of fines and given a strict deadline to bring everything up to code. When she received the notice, I watched from my front window as she crumpled it up and screamed into her front yard. The queen had been dethroned. But Karen, despite all the beatings her ego had taken, wasn't entirely done. Like a wounded animal, she limped through the neighborhood with narrowed eyes, whispering conspiracy theories about me to anyone who would listen. She even left a few flyers on mailboxes suggesting I was running a surveillance network on private citizens and abusing police resources to settle personal vendettas. Most of the neighborhood laughed it off. After all, I had become something of a minor hero among the less vocal residents, the ones who had quietly suffered under her tyranny for years. Still, I wasn't about to let my guard down. I upgraded my security system once more. Motion sensors tied to an app, cloud backups, and two-way intercoms disguised as yard decor. She wouldn't catch me off guard again. And just when I thought peace had settled, I received a letter in the mail, one not from the HOA or the city, but from Karen's lawyer. She was threatening to sue me for emotional distress, neighborhood defamation, and intentional harassment. I nearly spit out my coffee. It was a laughably thin letter, no real legal grounding, just bluster. But I consulted an attorney anyway, and we drafted a reply that essentially boiled down to, bring it on. I had video proof, police records, and multiple witness testimonies. Her case would crumble faster than a stale cracker in a rainstorm. She didn't follow through. I suspect even her lawyer told her it was hopeless. So what happened after that? The electricity theft stopped for good. Her SUV started disappearing during the evenings, likely charging at a station far from prying eyes. She stopped attending HOA meetings, stopped waving at people. She became a ghost in her own kingdom, the once feared monarch now reduced to a muttering presence in a bathrobe who glared from behind curtains. I had taken every hit she threw and turned them into weapons. She underestimated me. She thought being loud and smug was power, but real power, I learned, came from being strategic, observant, and just petty enough to fight fire with tactical napalm. And in the end, she lost. Despite Karen's suspension from the HOA presidency and the growing mountain of embarrassment she'd accumulated after my Power Thief of the Month stunt went semi-viral on the local Facebook neighborhood group, I knew the war wasn't over, not even close. Karen wasn't just angry now. She was wounded, and a wounded Karen was far more dangerous than a smug one. That became immediately clear when I noticed that every time I left my house, I'd return to some subtle act of passive aggression. My trash bins would be mysteriously tipped over, the edges of my lawn just barely scorched as though someone had taken a magnifying glass to it, and one time, most infuriating of all, I found a single dead fish placed directly in my mailbox, wrapped in yesterday's HOA newsletter with the word parasite scrawled in Sharpie across it. I wasn't dealing with a neighbor anymore. I was dealing with a nemesis. But instead of retaliating with more pettiness, I went strategic. I started logging every single incident, compiling an ironclad record of Karen's actions. My electrician friend, Kyle, came back to upgrade my trap. This time, we set up what we called the decoy grid, a harmless-looking outdoor extension box that was fully rigged to trigger a chain of alerts, including a discreet GPS tracker hidden inside the outlet cover that would ping Karen's phone if she connected to it, making it traceable in case of another theft. Karen wouldn't be able to help herself. It was a siren song too sweet for her greed to resist. But while I set the trap, I also began quietly connecting with other neighbors. Pat from 3 houses down, Lisa from the corner lot, even old man Herbert with his yard full of plastic flamingos. Turns out, nearly everyone had a Karen story. From minor annoyances like stealing delivered packages and claiming they must have been misdelivered, to full-on harassment over improperly stacked firewood. Karen's reign had been long and unchecked. With the HOA board now partially turned against her and neighbors increasingly unafraid to speak out, I realized we had something precious, a rare moment of unity born out of shared frustration. So we held an unofficial neighborhood meeting. No formal HOA nonsense, just people, snacks, folding chairs, and stories. That night, on my back patio, something changed. The neighbors didn't just vent, they coordinated. Lisa, a graphic designer, offered to make awareness flyers. Pat, who worked in IT, said he could help analyze data from security cameras. Even Herbert revealed that he'd caught Karen trying to unscrew his garden motion sensor light to stop it from blinking in her bedroom window. The community wasn't just fed up, they were ready to fight back. And the very next night, Karen walked straight into our collective plan. It started with a low hum just past midnight. Familiar, rhythmic, unmistakable. The sound of her portable charger being wheeled into position. From my bedroom window, I watched as she crept down her driveway, peered around like a raccoon in yoga pants, and then made her way to the decoy box Kyle and I had mounted near the edge of my fence. She crouched, plugged in, and click, the system activated. Lights in my house flickered briefly in a pre-programmed signal. Her phone, no doubt synced to the plug via Bluetooth, now pinged its location straight to Pat's server. A hidden infrared camera caught her expression perfectly as the voice-activated speaker kicked in with a new message. This time, customized just for her. Attention! You are now being recorded committing theft. GPS tracking enabled. Smile for the authorities. Karen froze. Her face twisted into a panicked grimace, and she fumbled to yank the plug, only to get her extension cord tangled around her own foot and stumble backward into my hydrangeas. The loudspeaker switched to a fake police scanner feed, escalating tension. Unit 9 responding to 421 Grand Oak Lane. Suspect on premises. She screamed, a piercing theatrical shriek, and ran back to her house, dragging the cord like a tail behind her. What she didn't know, however, was that the real fun had just begun. Pat sent out a message in the neighborhood group chat we'd created, Stage 2, go. The next morning, 20 households received a cheerful-looking newsletter with a bold title, Current Events, Community Alert on Unauthorized Power Usage. It featured stills from Karen's midnight theft attempt, a short blurb on utility tampering laws, and an anonymous tip line for reporting suspicious electric activity. We printed hard copies and walked the neighborhood, slipping them into mailboxes with smiles and morning greetings. The community was buzzing. Finally, people felt empowered. Karen, however, went nuclear. She stormed into the HOA's makeshift office, still being run from the treasurer's living room since the official building was being renovated, and tried to file formal complaints against the conspiracy to defame and harass her. She accused me of orchestrating a cyber attack, of illegally surveilling a private citizen, and my favorite, operating an underground electric militia. But this time, her shrill rants didn't work. The treasurer, a no-nonsense retired school principal named Gloria, calmly asked if Karen had any evidence. Karen sputtered, demanded a special meeting, and stormed out, only to find a new sign in front of her house, tastefully designed by Lisa, that read, Caution! Live wires nearby, stealing power may cause short-term embarrassment and long-term consequences. It was taped legally to a lamppost on public property, well within code. Karen tore it down in front of several laughing onlookers, who began filming. The footage of her tantrum, the cord coiled in her hands, The unhinged monologue she delivered to no one in particular was uploaded to a neighborhood subreddit under the title Karen Gets Zapped. It hit 10,000 views in 3 hours. But the tipping point came when she tried to file a restraining order against me. She walked into the courthouse, clutching a folder stuffed with screen grabs, printed memes, and out-of-context footage from my security camera system, and tried to convince a judge that I was terrorizing her. Unfortunately for her, I had already submitted a comprehensive counterpacket days earlier, including full footage of her stealing power, trespassing, and even snooping into my backyard when she thought no one was watching. In the aftermath, I finally felt peace return. Not just silence, but the genuine calm that comes when you know your home is truly yours again, your boundaries respected, your neighbors supportive, and your nights uninterrupted by the paranoia of extension cords snaking across the lawn. And I used the momentum to spearhead a new community initiative called Neighbors First, aimed at promoting mutual respect, open dialogue, and transparent conflict resolution without resorting to pettiness or power plays, and the turnout was overwhelming. Even people who had previously stayed on the sidelines now felt empowered to share, participate, and rebuild the trust that Karen's divisiveness had eroded over the years. And while I never imagined I'd become the face of anti-Karen resistance, I embraced the role with humor and humility, often joking that all it took to fix our HOA was a stolen kilowatt and a well-placed trail cam. Months passed. My yard healed. The trench was filled, the roses replanted, and the ghost of Karen's reign faded into something between folklore and neighborhood legend. Children once again played freely on the sidewalks, chalking dragons and rainbows without fear of citations. Halloween saw an explosion of decorations. LED pumpkins, 12-foot skeletons, animatronic spiders, all in open defiance of the oppressive aesthetic minimalism Karen once imposed. I even bought a wind chime and hung it proudly by my front door, where it sang softly in the breeze like a symbol of reclaimed freedom. And though Karen remained in her house, now more recluse than tyrant, we hardly saw her anymore. Just a twitch of blinds, a glint of glasses in the window, the occasional rattle of trash cans dragged begrudgingly to the curb. But she was no longer a threat, merely a relic of a darker time, a warning to others that power abused is power revoked. In the end, this war over electricity became something greater. A stand for sanity, for autonomy, for the right to enjoy one's home without interference or theft or HOA tyranny. And though it took cameras, citations, police, and a brush with municipal fraud, I'd do it all again if I had to, because nothing is more worth fighting for than peace in your own space, and no one has the right to take that from you, not even the self-appointed queen of electric SUVs with a garage full of bad ideas and a heart full of voltage.